A few days ago, I had to go someplace, and I had a difficult time finding a parking space. So I pulled down a side street and then found a space in front of a person's house. And actually, the place where I parked is not that far from the Catholic TV studios. As a matter of fact, it's maybe only a couple of blocks away. And as I got out of the car, I saw a garden. And I was surprised at how this garden was still going strong, because it is the beginning of November. Actually, it was All Souls Day that I walked past this house. And there were all sorts of, on one side, there were all sorts of flowers that were in the garden. The typical fall flowers that we might see, the mums and the marigolds and what have you. And then there were all sorts of other flowers that you normally see toward the end of the summer. But the thing is that they looked like they were brand new. They looked like they had just sprouted. Whereas a few doors down, you kind of saw that some of them had probably had a little bit of a frost or what have you, and actually a few doors down, the person was taking out the fall flowers from his garden. But also, I noticed too that there was a tomato plant that was still there, and there were actually tomatoes on the plant that didn't look like they had been affected by the cold. And there were also some peppers and things that were growing that, again, did not look like they had been affected by anything. And so I was marveling at them, and then the owner of the house must have realized that somebody was marveling at his garden, because he came out and started telling me about all the different things that he does to keep his garden as fresh as he can for as long as he can. And he figured he probably had maybe about another week before he would probably have to start clearing out the garden. Although where we had temperatures in the 70s and things, it might be 2 weeks that he'll be taking things out of his garden. But it reminded me of something that I had read. Actually, I think I had read it that day. It was just in a book of famous quotes that St. Francis de Sales had to say about the mustard seed. And he was telling a person that he was encouraging to do good works and to use their gifts. That when you look at it on the outside of a mustard seed or any seed, you don't see all that much that makes it all that interesting. But of course, inside that seed is the potential for all sorts of growth. And he started mentioning about the leaves and the stems and the roots going into the ground and what have you, and it flourishing into something great. And I think that might be something that we can take with us as we look at the gospel that we have today. Because we have Jesus speaking at the beginning of the gospel about the importance of our behavior. The importance of not causing scandal, the importance of living an upright life, and also not being the cause of scandal to others. Then he speaks about forgiveness. And of course, we know how important forgiveness is in the Christian life. We also know, if we're honest, that sometimes forgiveness is not always the easiest thing to do. We want the Lord to forgive us, but sometimes we might have trouble forgiving others. But as Jesus is speaking in the gospel today, we know it's something that we're called to strive for. Then the apostles asked Jesus to increase their faith. And Jesus speaks about a mustard seed. And he speaks about a mustard seed in two ways in the Gospels. One is he uses a mustard seed as an image of the kingdom of God. And when that mustard seed is planted, how it grows. And in the ancient world, it was very common to plant mustard seeds because they could be used as a border, and they grew and grew and grew. And not only did they grow, but they provided food. They also were places where animals would rest, particularly birds. And they also gave a little bit of color to the area so that they added beauty. But he also speaks about faith being the size of mustard seed and all the things that you can do. And this time he's speaking to the apostles. And he tells them about this faith of the mustard seed. And perhaps he wanted them to realize that, they did have the gift of faith. They did have that faith the size of mustard seed. But then it was going to grow. And it was going to flourish. And it was going to do all sorts of things. And, certainly we know where our church is built on the foundation of the apostles who received the message from Jesus Christ and went about the world beginning the spread of the gospel, and how that has continued to our day today. How that faith grows, and all the different ways that faith can blossom. And I think that maybe as we're in the month of November, a month that we remember the saints and the souls in purgatory. A month begins with All Saints' Day, continues the next day with All Souls' Day. But it's something, during the month of November to kind of think about the saints as we also pray for the souls. To think about the different ways that their faith has grown, that their faith has been sowed, and how it's grown. When you think about it, how many beautiful churches are there? When we see the outside, we're impressed by the size. When we go inside, there's probably a very good chance that we're going to see beautiful stained glass windows, Stations of the Cross that draw us into the Passion. And then we'll see all sorts of pews and things. They'll be painted different colors. Our hearts and minds are directed toward God when we walk into these buildings. And think about what it took to get them built. Certainly when we look at the interior, there were artists who shared their gifts. As far as the building itself is concerned, there was an architect who shared his or her gifts. Then when we think about the fact that the church was built because so many people gave so that church could be built, and how many of them, especially 100, 150 years ago, who were building these churches, didn't really have much to give. But they gave what they could so that we had the beautiful structures we have today. With all these different people, what we're seeing is the gift of faith, that mustard seed sprouting in ways that you can't imagine. But of course, we know too that our church is more than just the beautiful buildings. It's much more than our beautiful buildings. When we think about the great saints who were martyrs, the great saints who led us in prayer, the great saints who were missionaries, those who served the poor, whether they opened hospitals, whether they opened outreach centers, those who spent their life in education. All these different ways that the church grew. And it's growing in our world today as well. If our archdiocese is blessed, and I'm sure other dioceses that are watching this Mass today have been blessed, with priests that have come from Africa, or nuns who have come to the United States to study, who are serving in Africa. When they talk about the ways that the church is growing, whether it be in Nigeria or Ghana or Kenya, all sorts of rich and wonderful things are happening, and the faith is being spread. We never know quite how these seeds are going to grow, as St. Francis de Sales was telling this person, but they do grow. And maybe our thinking about that as we reflect on the gospel today reminds us that we all, whether it's through our prayer, our good works, or our sacrifices, have something we can be doing to build up the faith and spread the faith and continue the work of Jesus Christ to our day.